the gold mining technique, why negative feedback is the most critical loop. A lot of people, when they're asked to give advice, they talk about things like follow your passion or believe in yourself. And, you know, those things aren't necessarily wrong, but they miss the most important part. They lack utility. They are not an executable algorithm. I think the best, most important advice I know is something that almost no one does, very few people. It is actively seek negative feedback. I'm serious about this. I've been saying this for years. A well thought out critique of whatever you're doing is as valuable as gold. And I really mean that. It is. The most valuable resource you can possibly mine. Tell me what you don't like. The pain problem, why your brain fights the gold. Let's talk about something that almost no one wants to talk about, pain. The problem with feedback, real, raw, unfiltered feedback, is that most people spend their entire lives avoiding it. Not by accident, but on purpose. Why? Because it hurts. It actually hurts. Not metaphorically, neurologically. When someone criticizes your work, your idea, your product, or you, your brain doesn't see that as useful information. It sees it as danger. See, the human brain, our base operating system, wasn't designed to seek truth. It wasn't designed to make rockets or electric cars or artificial intelligence. It was designed for one thing, survival in a tribe. For millions of years, our ancestors lived in small groups, maybe 100 to 150 people. And inside that tribe, the single greatest threat to your survival wasn't a tiger or hunger or weather, it was rejection. If the tribe didn't like you, if they disapproved of you, you were exiled. And exile meant death, alone, cold, left for the beasts. So when someone criticizes you today, your brain doesn't say, oh, thank you for the valuable input. No. It says, I'm about to die. It triggers the same primal alarm, cortisol spikes, adrenaline floods. The same system that once helped you survive in the wild now keeps you from growing in your work. That's why it feels so personal. That's why negative feedback stings even when you know it's right. And so what do most people do? They build defenses. They construct this incredibly sophisticated psychological structure called the ego. It's like emotional armor. It exists to protect you from pain, from criticism, from discomfort. Over time, the ego becomes a full-time defense mechanism. It filters what you hear. It surrounds you with yes people, people who tell you what you want to hear. It rewards comfort. It punishes truth. And before long, you end up living inside a beautifully decorated bubble where everything sounds nice, but nothing changes. You get validation, you get praise, you feel good, but you don't grow.
That's the great irony. The very thing that protects your feelings also destroys your progress. It's a fundamental bug in the human operating system. The brain's goal is not to find truth, it's to avoid pain.
But if you want to do anything meaningful, anything new, anything disruptive, you have to rewrite that code. You have to retrain your system. Because the truth, especially negative feedback, is the most valuable data you'll ever receive. It's gold. And most people are walking away from it, they ignore it, they hide from it, they run toward comfort instead. But if you want to build something that matters, you have to do the opposite. You have to lean into the pain, you have to mine for it, you have to learn to love it. When someone tells you what's wrong, don't get defensive. Get curious. Ask why, ask what did I miss, ask how can I make this better. If you can build that reflex, if you can override your evolutionary code, you become unstoppable. Because most people can't do that. They'll protect their ego to the grave. They'll stay in comfort zones their whole lives, and they'll never see what they could have become. But if you can push through that pain, if you can embrace it, you can achieve things that almost no one else can. That's why I always say the most common mistake is not actively seeking out and listening to negative feedback. That's where the gold is, that's where the truth lives, and that's where growth begins. So don't run from the pain, run toward it. Because on the other side of that pain is the insight that changes everything. The coaxing technique, mining for it, is not passive. You can't just sit there and hope someone will criticize you. They won't. You can't just ask, what do you think of my new product? Why? Because most people will lie to you, especially your friends. Usually, your friends know what's wrong, but they don't want to tell you because they don't want to hurt you. They want to, encourage you. So they'll say, oh, I like this and that, and they will deliberately omit the this is the stuff I don't like list. They are trying to be a good friend socially, but they are being a terrible engineer. So you have to intervene. You have to coax it out of them. You have to create a safe space where the social contract is temporarily suspended in favor of the engineering contract. This is my script. I've used it for years. When I give a friend a new product, a Tesla, or show them a design, I say explicitly, I look them in the eye and I say, look, don't tell me what you like, tell me what you don't like. This is not just a question, it is a psychological intervention. You are hacking their social instinct. By only asking for the negative, you are giving them permission. You are telling them that in this specific context, the gold is more valuable than kindness. You are redefining their role from supportive friend to engineering ally. And you should listen. It doesn't mean your friend is always right, but very often they are right. Even if they're wrong about why, they're often right that something is wrong. Their feeling is a valid data point. And, sometimes even your enemies give you good negative feedback, absolutely. Because they don't care about your feelings. They are not bound by the social contract. They will tell you straight. Their motive might be toxic, but the data could be pure gold. And the new default assumption, you are wrong, all of this, everything we've talked about requires a fundamental rewiring of how you think, a complete shift in your mental model of reality. Most people go through life with one default assumption, I am right. That's the starting point for 99% of humanity. They wake up every morning assuming their beliefs are correct, their ideas are good, their methods are proven, and their conclusions are sound. And because they start from that assumption, everything that challenges it feels like an attack. When the world pushes back, when data disagrees, when the market doesn't respond, when feedback contradicts their view, they don't treat it as information. They treat it as a threat. They defend their position. They double down, they rationalize, they build narratives to protect their sense of being right. That's how most people live. And that's exactly why most people don't innovate, because innovation requires the opposite assumption. You have to flip it completely. You have to wake up every day and assume, I am wrong. You, the entrepreneur, you, the engineer, you, the leader, you are wrong. Not maybe wrong. Wrong by default. That's not pessimism, that's intellectual humility. That's scientific thinking. It's how you build rockets that actually reach orbit instead of explode on the pad. You see, your goal is not to be right. Your goal is to be less wrong. That's the difference between people who argue and people who build. When you're chasing rightness, failure feels like death. It's catastrophic, it's personal, it's emotional, because it threatens your identity. But when you're chasing less wrong, failure becomes data. It's not a personal defeat, it's a measurement, it's information, it's feedback for your next iteration. Suddenly, every mistake has value. Every wrong turn, every wrong assumption becomes a signal. You start collecting errors like a scientist collecting samples. You're not embarrassed by them, you're curious about them. You ask, why was I wrong? What variable did I miss? How can I update my model? This is how progress happens, one correction at a time. You don't leap from wrong to right in a single move. You iterate from wrong to less wrong to slightly better until it works. That's what rockets are, that's what companies are, that's what life is. A series of controlled explosions gradually tuned into flight. That's why I say, and I mean this literally, view positive feedback like water off a duck's back. It feels nice, it strokes the ego, but it doesn't teach you much. Positive feedback tells you that what you already believe is working, which might just mean the world hasn't noticed the flaw yet. So you have to underweight it. Enjoy it for 5 seconds, then move on. But negative feedback, that's the gold, that's the data that helps you become less wrong. That's the thing that actually makes you better. When someone tells you, hey, this doesn't make sense, or this doesn't work, or this could be improved, your instinct will want to defend. But the mindset shift is this. Don't defend, investigate, Because the goal isn't to prove you're right. The goal is to discover why you're wrong and fix it faster than anyone else. If you can build that reflex, if you can learn to interpret every piece of feedback, even the painful kind, as a clue in the process of becoming less wrong, then there's almost nothing you can't solve. You become adaptive, you become anti-fragile, you stop being emotionally attached to outcomes, and start being emotionally attached to progress. That's what separates the people who stagnate from the ones who built the future. Because the future doesn't belong to those who insist they're right. It belongs to those who are willing to be wrong faster, smarter, and more often. So the operating system for reality, first principles thinking, but negative feedback is worthless if you don't have an operating system to process it. You can collect all the gold in the world, but if you don't have a smelter, it's just shiny rocks. That operating system, that smelter, is first principles thinking. The problem of analogy, here's how most people and most companies operate. They reason by analogy, they look around, they see what others are doing, and then they copy it. Maybe they change a few things. They tweak the edges. They think, well, my competitor did X, so we'll do X plus 10%. Or everyone in this industry does it this way, so this must be the only way. That mindset reasoning by analogy is everywhere. And it's killing innovation, because when you reason by analogy, you're not actually thinking, you're just following patterns that someone else already created. You're assuming the world works exactly as they perceived it. You're trusting their assumptions more than your own curiosity. It's intellectual laziness disguised as strategy. It's copying someone else's homework and calling it learning. And you don't learn anything that way. You just replicate the same mistakes at a slightly higher resolution. And this is how industries stagnate. This is how great companies become mediocre. Everyone's too busy trying to outdo each other by 5% instead of trying to change the entire game by 500%. Reasoning by analogy is like living your life in echo mode. You're just replaying the ideas of others slightly remixed. When you're operating from analogy, negative feedback doesn't even help much because your goals are too small. Your definition of progress is too narrow. You think, okay, our competitor's golf cart goes 19 miles per hour, let's make ours go 20. That's not innovation. That's iteration. And iteration alone won't get you to Mars. It's not that analogy is evil, it's that it limits your field of vision. It keeps you trapped in what already exists. Every time you reason by analogy, you reinforce the boundaries of the current system, and you forget that those boundaries are arbitrary. They're man-made. Someone just decided that's how it works, and everyone else copied it. At SpaceX, at Tesla, at Neuralink, we try very hard to avoid reasoning by analogy. We reason from first principles. That means you don't assume anything. You take the problem, you break it down to the fundamental truths, the physics, the constraints that absolutely cannot be violated, and you build up from there. When you reason that way, you stop asking, what are other people doing, and start asking, what is actually possible? That's the question that unlocks the future. If we had reasoned by analogy, SpaceX would never have existed. Everyone in the aerospace industry told us it was impossible to make rockets reusable. They said, that's not how it's done. And they were right under their assumptions. But we weren't playing their game. We weren't reasoning from analogy. We asked, what are the actual physical limits? How much energy does it really take to land a booster? Can we design materials that survive re-entry? What if we build it ourselves instead of outsourcing everything? Those questions don't come from analogy. They come from first principles. And that's why we're launching rockets for a fraction of the traditional cost and landing them. If we had copied the old playbook, we'd still be another aerospace supplier bidding for government contracts. Instead, we changed the entire equation. So here's the rule. If your plan is X plus 10%, you're reasoning by analogy. If your plan is, what if we throw away all the assumptions and rebuild it from scratch? You're reasoning from first principles. Deconstructing reality, physics is the ultimate signal. First principles thinking is the tool for breaking the analogy. I tend to approach things from a physics framework. Physics doesn't care about human conventions. It doesn't care how things have always been done. Physics teaches you to reason from first principles rather than by analogy. The definition is simple. You break a process down to the fundamental parts that you know are true, and then build up from there. You ask what is absolutely necessary, what is dictated by the laws of physics, and what is simply dictated by human stupidity or historical inertia. And here is the critical link. Negative feedback is the tool that forces you to use first principles. When someone tells you that's impossible or that's too expensive or you can't do that, the analogy reasoner says, okay, I guess not. The first principles reasoner says, why? You have to ask why 5 times. Why is it expensive? Because it's made of material X. Why must it be made of material X? Because that's what we've always used. Well, do the laws of physics state it must be material X? Or is there a fundamentally cheaper material that can do the job? The negative feedback forces you to dig all the way down to the laws of physics. Case study 1, stupidly expensive rockets. I'll give you an example, SpaceX. When I started thinking about SpaceX, the goal was, make humanity a multi-planetary species. First step, a small greenhouse on Mars. So I went to Russia to try to buy a couple of refurbished ICBMs, and that was an experience. A lot of vodka. But the feedback from the market, the analogy-based feedback, rockets are expensive. They wanted $65 million for one rocket, and that was for a used one. This negative feedback triggered first principles thinking. It forced me to ask, wait, what is a rocket made of? Deconstruction. It's made of aerospace-grade aluminum alloys, some titanium, copper, and carbon fiber analysis. Okay. What is the value of those materials on the commodity market? And when I did the math, it turned out the materials cost of a rocket was around 2% of the typical price. 2%. So what was the other 98% of the cost? It was noise. It was inefficiency. It was bureaucracy, stacked subcontractors, decades of accumulated margins, and a lot of people in suits telling you things have to be expensive. The market feedback was wrong. It was based on analogy. The physics was right. It was based on first principles. The conclusion was unavoidable. Instead of buying a finished rocket, we decided to found our own company, buy the raw materials cheaply, and build the rockets ourselves. That's why SpaceX exists. It was born from treating the market's negative feedback as a signal to dig deeper, rather than as a stop sign. Case study 2, stupidly expensive batteries. The same thing, the exact same thing, happened with Tesla's batteries. Analogy, feedback. Everyone in the auto and battery industry knew that. Battery packs are expensive. They cost $600 per kilowatt hour, and they always will. First principles trigger, we cannot build an affordable electric car, a car for the mass market, at that cost. It's physically impossible. So we applied the same logic, deconstruction. What are the material constituents of the battery? It has cobalt, nickel, aluminum, carbon, some polymers for separation, and a steel can. Okay, if we bought all those things on the London Metal Exchange, what would they cost? And the answer was, it's like $80 per kilowatt hour. Again, a massive gap. $600 versus $80. Again, the vast majority of the cost was noise. It was inefficient manufacturing processes stacked on top of each other for decades. And again, the negative feedback showed us the gold mine. The problem wasn't the raw materials. The problem was just needing to think of clever ways to take those materials and combine them into the shape of a battery cell. The problem was manufacturing. The problem was the factory. The problem was the machine that builds the machine. And that led me to my biggest mistake, the 5-step algorithm to be less dumb. What is the algorithm? So you have the feedback. It's gold. You've used first principles to smelt it and find the real physical signal. Now, what is your action? How do you turn that gold into an actual shippable product? We have a 5-step process we try to apply rigorously at SpaceX and Tesla. This is how you turn gold into hardware. It's really algorithm for being less dumb. The 5-step algorithm breakdown. It works like this. 1, make the requirements less dumb. Your requirements are definitely dumb. This is just a fact. It does not matter who gave them to you. In fact, requirements from a smart person are often the most dangerous because you probably won't question them. This step is actively seeking negative feedback. You must attack every requirement, every spec, every constraint. And critically, every requirement must come with the name of the person who made it, not a department. Never accept a requirement that comes from the legal department or the safety department. There must be a human name attached to it because you need to talk to that person. You need to ask them why. You need to vet their logic against first principles. 2, delete the part or process. This is the most important, if you can delete it. The natural bias, especially in big organizations, is to add things just in case. My rule is if you are not adding back at least 10% of the parts or processes you deleted, you are clearly not deleting enough. Start by assuming it's not needed. Force it to prove its value to exist. 3, simplify or optimize. You only do this after you have deleted. This is probably the most common error of a smart engineer, is to optimize a thing. That should not exist in the first place. People waste years of their lives making a 5% improvement on a process that should have been thrown in the trash. Delete first. Then, and only then, optimize. 4, accelerate cycle time. Once you have deleted the dumb parts and simplified what's left, now you can go fast. Every process can be sped up. But don't accelerate a dumb process. That just generates, dumb results faster. 5, automate this. This comes last. And I know this because I screwed it up badly. The solution. Shorten the feedback loop to 0. So what was the solution? I moved my desk to the middle of the factory floor. I put it at the end of the assembly line. I slept under the desk or on a narrow couch. Why? Not for show. It was to shorten the feedback loop to 0. I wanted to see with my own eyes and when the line stopped. I wanted the engineers to hear the complaints, see the flashing lights, feel the floor vibrate. I wanted the pain to be immediate. No email filters, no meetings, no PowerPoint presentations, just physical reality. And we executed the algorithm ruthlessly. We ripped out the entire conveyor system, just junked it. We brought humans back to the line. This is when I tweeted, humans are underrated because they are the most adaptable machines we have. To meet our 5,000 cars a week goal, we realized we couldn't fix the factory fast enough. The feedback was this building is a bottleneck. So we built an entire new assembly line in a tent in the parking lot in a few weeks. It was ugly. It was messy, but it worked. We got out of hell by embracing the negative feedback, admitting we were catastrophically wrong, deleting the process, and building up from scratch. It was the only way. Why your rockets must blow up. The philosophy of Rudd, failure is not an option, is a dumb saying this philosophy. It's even more critical in the rocket business. There's an old saying in aerospace, from the Apollo era, failure is not an option. I disagree. At SpaceX, failure is an option. In fact, if you are not failing, you are not innovating enough. Now, I know this sounds contradictory. I've also said that. Failure sucks. And I've said, you learn more from success, because there are many more ways to fail than to succeed. If you found the one thing that succeeds, that's great. So how can both of those be true? How can failure be both sucky and an option? Because failure and success are part of the same loop. An explosion is not the end. It is not a moral failing. It is a mandatory data point. It is a test. You don't learn much from the explosion itself, but you learn everything from finding the reason for the explosion. An explosion is the most pure, immediate, undeniable form of negative feedback the universe can provide, and you should listen. The SpaceX origin story, a lesson in 3 explosions. This is not theory. This is the origin story of SpaceX. When we started Falcon 1, we had $100 million. That sounds like a lot. But in space, it's nothing. We had no money for decade-long analysis contracts. We had to build and fly. Failure 1, the event Falcon 1 lifts off from Kwajalein. And then, boom, right after launch, T plus 33 seconds, a fireball. The feedback. We found the wreckage. The cause? A corroded nut, an aluminum nut in a salt air environment. Stupid. The lesson, don't use aluminum nuts there. Failure 2, the event, much better launch. First stage separation, second stage starts, and then it starts. Oscillating, harmonic oscillation. The fuel sloshed around, and the engine shut down too early. Not enough velocity, didn't reach orbit. Our physical models of fluid dynamics were wrong. The lesson, add baffles, basically. Slosh dampeners to the fuel tank. Failure 3, the event. Had NASA satellites on it this time. Beautiful launch. Stage separation. And then, boom, the first stage collided with the second stage. I had not, anticipated that. The feedback, the residual thrust from the first stage engine, even after shutdown, was enough for it to catch up and hit the second stage. The lesson, increased the time delay between engine shutdown and stage separation. The result, that was 3 failures, 3 fireballs. By this point, we were broke, out of money. I'd burned through almost all of my money. Tesla was in trouble too. It was 2008, a bad year. We had just enough parts for one last launch, just one. If the 4th one failed, SpaceX would be over. September 2008, the 4th launch, it worked. It reached orbit. We succeeded because of the first 3 failures. We iterated on the negative feedback until we were less wrong. Case study in failure, production hell in 2017, 2018. We were in what I call production hell for the Model 3. This was the period where the company really almost went bankrupt. We were burning money at an insane rate. Everything was wrong, and it was my fault. What was the vision? I had this vision driven by the battery first principles discovery that manufacturing was everything. The machine that builds the machine, I called it the alien dreadnought. The idea was a fully automated factory, lights out, no people, just robots. Raw materials go in one end and cars come out the other. It would look like an alien spaceship. What was the mistake? We violated step 5. We went straight to automate. We tried to automate a process. That was fundamentally still dumb. We had not completed steps 1, 2, and 3. Excessive automation at Tesla was a mistake, to be precise, my mistake. Feedback from physical reality and, did physical reality give us negative feedback? Fast and hard. The alien dreadnought was the physical embodiment of designing in a vacuum. It was a PowerPoint model turned into metal. It was designed to reject feedback. It was designed for perfection. And the physical world is not perfect. Specific failure 1, the conveyor belts. We had this crazy complex network of conveyor belts, miles of them. The idea was everything would move seamlessly from station to station. The problem? It was too brittle. It had no resilience. If a single sensor failed or a part got jammed, the entire line stopped, dead. Specific failure two, the battery assembly robots. We had these automated robots designed to pick up battery cells and place them into modules. But the cells, they had tiny micron level variations, or they weren't in the exact position the robot expected. A human would just, shrug, adjust their hand by a millimeter, and put it in. They adapt. The robot, it just stopped. Completely useless. It would crash into something or just freeze. Production hell was the factory itself, giving us negative feedback. It was screaming at us that our requirements were dumb. Rapid unscheduled disassembly. This is why we have the term. Rapid unscheduled disassembly. RUD. When the Falcon 9 was first trying to land on the drone ship, a lot of them RUD. Now, this is not just a joke, although it is pretty funny. It's a philosophy. Think about the language. This is a rhetorical analysis. The word failure or explosion, it's emotional. It's binary. It's final. It induces the pain we talked about, the word disassembly. It's a process term. It implies something that can be reassembled. The word unscheduled, it implies a timing problem, not a physical impossibility. The entire term is a psychological engineering tool. It neutralizes the pain of the feedback. It turns a catastrophic event into a valuable data point. It allows the engineers to look at the fireball and instead of feeling despair, they feel curiosity. They don't say, oh no, we failed. They say, what did the telemetry data show just before disassembly began? Starship, the RUD philosophy perfected. What we are doing with Starship right now at Starbase is this philosophy at the largest possible scale. Traditional aerospace programs, they spend a decade on analysis. They try to make it perfect on PowerPoint. They are so afraid of failure that they almost never fly. And when they do, at a cost of billions, it cannot fail. We take the opposite approach. We build and fly. We accept failure as a step. Starship Flight 7 anomaly, we had a harmonic response stronger than expected. Basically, the rocket shook itself to death. Feedback, our models were wrong. Action, add dampeners, strengthen the hardware. Ship 36, anomaly. It disassembled on the test stand, just sitting there. Feedback, great. It blew up. Why? A failed nitrogen COV action. Better, it blew up on the ground than at 100 kilometers. We found a design flaw before it flew. With a test like this, success comes from what we learn. Every RUD is a gold mine of data. Every RUD eliminates a failure mode from the system. You iterate and iterate and iterate until all the ways to fail have been removed. And the only thing left is success. Distinguishing signal from noise, unregretted user seconds. The biggest problem with a massive feedback loop like X is distinguishing signal from noise. What is noise? Most companies, they focus on noise. Advertising dollars, meetings. Excessive meetings are the blight of big companies. They feel productive, but they are noise pretending to be signal. At Tesla, we don't spend money on advertising, zero. We invest all the money into R&D, manufacturing design to make the car as good as possible. What is signal? Signal is anything that results in a better product or service. Applying to X, we started getting a lot of feedback that the algorithm was pushing too much negativity. Now, this is interesting. When we looked at the metrics, technically, that negativity was increasing user time. People were arguing more, they were engaged. But it was not increasing what we started to call unregretted user seconds. People were leaving feeling bad. They regretted the time they spent. This was a first principles discovery. Engagement is an analogy metric. It's a noise signal. Unregretted time is the true fundamental signal. The negative feedback from users was the gold that allowed us to distinguish between the two. So we made an algorithm tweak to promote more informational, entertaining content. We started optimizing for unregretted time, Grok, the signal filtering machine. The problem is there are over 100 million posts per day. A human cannot read it all. It's too much noise. This is why we built Grok. Grok's purpose is to read every post and watch every video to match users with content they actually find interesting. It has real-time access to the X feedback loop. It is designed to summarize debates, find different points of view, and ultimately help you find the signal in the noise storm. Grok is an attempt to automate the feedback loop, to filter the noise and find the signal for every individual. The global feedback loop, X Grok, and unregretted user seconds, X is the ultimate feedback loop. This brings us to X. I get a lot of negative feedback on X, a lot. People ask, why did you buy Twitter? Obviously, it was not a great financial decision in the short term, but X is the global town square. It is the nervous system of humanity. It is the real-time global feedback loop. And the problem was that feedback loop was broken. It was censored. It was manipulated. The parameters of the algorithm were secret. The signal was being blocked. Open sourcing our flows. So one of the first things I wanted to do was open source the algorithm. Why? Not because we think it's smart, but to show its many flaws. Think about that. We are actively asking the world to tell us what we are doing wrong. We are inviting the millions of the world's best engineers to look at our code and give us gold. We are saying, here is our logic, attack it, find the holes, point out the bias. We try to make it better every week, not always succeeding, but to be transparent. This is seeking negative feedback at a planetary scale, feedback in action, the resignation poll, and I have to act on it. You may remember not long after I took over, things were pretty chaotic. I posted a poll, should I step down as CEO of Twitter? I promised I will abide by the results of this poll. 17.5 million people voted, and 57.5% said yes. A lot of people thought I was joking. I was not. I promised I would abide by the results, and I did. As soon as I found a replacement, I stepped down as CEO. That is accepting the feedback. The loop must be closed. You seek feedback, you receive feedback, you act on feedback. Without the last step, the first two are meaningless. Why all this pain is worth it? What is the point? So why? Why go through production hell? Why watch your rockets explode over and over? Why voluntarily read insults about yourself on X every day? It's not to be a savior. I'm not trying to save anyone. It's not for money. After PayPal, I had enough money. It comes back to a fundamental question. The existential crisis and the candle of consciousness. When I was young in college, I had an existential crisis trying to figure out what does it all mean. And the conclusion I came to was we must act to try to expand the scope and scale of consciousness. Consciousness, self-awareness, is the most magical thing in the universe. It is this fragile candle of consciousness in a vast, endless, uncaring dark. The universe has been here for 13.8 billion years. Earth, 4.5 billion. Sentient life. It's just arrived. It is incredibly rare, incredibly fragile, and it could easily be extinguished. The ultimate feedback loop, the great filter, the history of life on Earth, is a series of extinction events. The universe will provide its own negative feedback, inevitably. An asteroid, a supervolcano, a solar event, something we create ourselves. The question is the great filter. Can a civilization become multiplanetary before a natural or self-inflicted extinction event destroys it? This is the ultimate feedback loop. Tesla is an attempt to address the negative feedback the planet is giving us about the climate. It's an attempt to achieve sustainable energy. SpaceX is an attempt to address the ultimate negative feedback of extinction. It is life insurance for life itself. It is a backup. Feedback is velocity. And this is the point. This is why negative feedback is the most important thing. It's not just a business strategy. It is a moral imperative. Because your feedback loop, your speed of iteration, determines whether you can solve the problems fast enough to survive. Every day you delay, every day you protect your ego, every day you fear the pain, every day you are lazy and reasoned by analogy, every day you sit in meaningless noise meetings. All of that, it is slowing the loop. It is noise. It is threatening the signal, which is consciousness. Actively seeking negative feedback, mining for the gold, is the only act of rebellion against chaos. It is how we fight entropy. It is how we accelerate the rate of iteration. It is how we, just maybe, protect that candle. E. Conclusion, the magicians of the 21st century, I am not blindly optimistic. I don't know if we will succeed, but I'd rather be optimistic and wrong than pessimistic and right. I'm just trying to think about the future and not be sad. Arthur C. Clarke said, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. You guys, you are the magicians of the 21st century. Don't let anything hold you back. Don't protect your ego, shatter it, don't avoid the pain, seek it. Don't accept the analogy, break it down to the atoms, seek the truth, seek the criticism, go out there and create some magic. Thank you.